The more things change, the more they remain the same. The controversy between original Jeet Kune Do and Jkd Concepts is something that has gone on for decades. And today we'll take another last look at it, because hopefully by the time we're done, we will all have decided there's no need to do this ever again. Hello, everyone. This is Dwight Woods, the Jeet Kune Do Rebel, and welcome to a special Friday issue of the I Love Jeet Kune Do broadcast. This is number 142, and this is about Jeet Kune Do originalism versus conceptualism. As you're logging in, if you guys would be kind enough to say where you're logging in from, hit the like button and feel free to continue doing so throughout the broadcast. If you're catching the final edit video on the YouTube, please be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell over there. If you enjoy my work and you'd like to support the program, visit jkdrebel.com, click on the Rebel Gear link, and see what we have to offer. But of course, the best thing you can do is to share this video and spread the word about the I Love Jeet Kune Do broadcast. Okay, so originalism, one definition is the principle or the belief that the original intent of an author should be adhered to in later interpretations of his work. One definition of conceptualism is the ability to analyze hypothetical situations or abstract concepts in order to compile insight. Conceptual thinkers are said to have an astute understanding of why something is being done. They can think at an abstract level and easily apply their insights to the situation. So for those of you who don't know, today's broadcast came about because my Jkd colleague and two-time Jkd Dialogues partner, Ron Koskowski, he posted a question for Richard Torres and me asking, what is the difference between a Jkd Concepts guy and an original Jkd guy? Ron said he wanted our opinions because he considers Richard and me to be like Jkd historians, right? So I'll go with that, right? I immediately thought that it would be a good topic with which to premiere a new program, the Jeet Kune Do debates, but Richard declined. So instead, I thought I'd do an extended I Love Jeet Kune Do broadcast and put this topic to rest. And in effect, I will, since here in the United States, everything is virtual now, we've got the DNC operating mostly virtually. I thought I'd do a virtual debate of topics that came up in that post. As a matter of fact, oh man, I printed it out, but I don't, it's over on the other table. That post, that Facebook post is 32 pages long. All right, so I printed it out this morning. I wanted to show it to you, but I left it over on the other table. So anyhow, so what I'm going to do is to read parts of Richard's response and then respond to his replies, sorry, and then I'll do it for a couple other people in there, right? Like Ron made some additional statements, and then there are other people. I'll refer a little bit to what they said, and then I'll give you my final thoughts, wrap it up, and put a nice bow on top, right? So Richard said, Ron, you asked what's the difference between a Jkd Concepts guy and an original Jkd guy. And he said, simply put, the former, right, the Concepts guy, is expressing Jeet Kune Do as taught by Dan Inosanto, and the latter is expressing Jeet Kune Do as taught by Bruce Lee. Now, everybody here knows Richard and I are good friends. Kind of like is said on TV in the newsrooms all the time. We don't agree on everything identically, but we respect each other and hold each other in high regard. So Richard has every right to his opinion, but that's all it is. It's not a concrete fact, right? There's nothing wrong with wanting to learn different styles, right? So I'm continuing to read what he said. There's nothing wrong with wanting to learn different styles, but that is not Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do or the way he taught it. Unfortunately, from the 80s and on, the Jkd concept method thrived, and the philosophy that was taught was to learn different styles. Pick what styles work best for you, and welcome to your own Jeet Kune Do. The little Bruce Lee principles that were taught as Jun Fan. And this mixing of styles was taught as Jkd Concepts. So this is the history of the concept method. Unfortunately, back then, a lot was lost to what exactly Bruce Lee taught. Okay, all right, so that is, that's accurate to a certain degree, right? But it's possible for something to be accurate and be incorrect because yours could be for you an accurate interpretation, but fact is where you can be incorrect. So Dan Inosanto loves being a student as much as he loves being an instructor. So here's what happened in the 1980s. As he would train with different people, he would do a few different things, if possible. One thing he would do is to open up a class for that instructor at the Inosanto Academy. A second thing he would do would be to try to get that instructor on the seminar circuit. And then the third thing he would do would be to teach what he was learning himself while he was out on his own seminar circuit. I would go so far as to say that he's never said or taught that these different arts were what constituted Jeet Kune Do, either his Jeet Kune Do or Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do. Now, it's true that there would be times where some seminar attendees or even some seminar hosts who hired Inosanto because of his Jkd connection to Bruce Lee became disappointed and or disillusioned when he would show more of the arts, the different arts, than what could be easily identified as Jeet Kune Do. And yes, there was also a trend to identify pure Bruce Lee material as Jun Fan kickboxing or Jun Fan Kung Fu. But keep in mind that before he himself named his art, Bruce Lee did refer to it as the Jun Fan method of Kung Fu, right? So continue with what Richard said. In reality, Bruce Lee taught that there should be no such thing as styles, but to train and refine the proper tools of martial arts to have totality. So what are the proper tools of martial arts? And what are the tools that allow you to be total? In my way of thinking, again, simply put, to approach totality in martial art, you boil it down to its absolute essentials. So one essential is that in martial art, there are only two types of training. There's empty hands and there's weaponry. So if you're going to have a total approach to martial arts, you need to train empty hands and all that falls within the realm of empty hands. And then you need to train weaponry and all that falls within the realm of weaponry. Then you have a total approach to martial art. Continuing with what Richard said, but the principle of simplicity, directness, and non-classicalness should be maintained. For totality can meet all situations, whereas partiality cannot. But adding style after style after style does not necessarily equal totality. And this type of training falls short of understanding what Jeet Kune Do is truly all about. Jeet Kune Do has no style so that it can fit in with all styles. Again, there's nothing wrong with wanting to study different styles. Just understand that it is not Bruce Lee's art of Jeet Kune Do. And he's quite right. And if any one of Sifu Dan's students are just adding on without doing the hacking away to arrive at the simple, direct, and non-classical or effective aspects of the art, as Richard just itemized, then they're not listening to what Sifu Dan is teaching. And in case you were listening, Richard, you can hack away as you're learning. You don't have to learn the whole thing. Like you would say, you don't have to learn the art from A to Z and learn the whole thing first and then hack away. You can make use of your previous Jkd insights and you can learn to immediately hack away a personal unessential while you are learning something, right? So that's a little bit of what Richard had to say. Ron Kosakowski, the one who got me in trouble in this whole thing, I'm just kidding, right? Ron wrote, I do feel if Bruce Lee were to live a long life, JKD would not be a mess and no arguments would have taken place, like we say in the late 80s and early 90s and beyond, even today in some cases. So I think I agree with that somewhat. I can see Bruce Lee doing exactly what he did at the LA Chinatown School, which is to come in 10% of the time, leave 90% of the instruction up to Dan and Asano, but just come by to check on things and make sure that everything was going okay. I can see him doing that if he had lived on and continued in the movie world in Hong Kong, in the United States, or wherever it is that movie making took him. I could see him continuing that, but then when while having Inosanto run things at the Chinatown School, and then whenever he had the time, Cedar Bruce would come in and check and keep an eye on things and make sure that everything was up to speed, right? To continue what Ron said, there are things JKD lacked, I feel, during the development: bladed and impact weapons, self-defense, and of course grappling. So there were the few that dove into an area pretty deep and caught hell for it in martial art magazines and then in forums when computers came around. But to me, you cannot defend either area without the knowledge of them, and a lot of knowledge if you fight a good wrestler or against a knife-wielding maniac, right? Okay, so what Ron's talking about here to me is more of the total approach that I just mentioned, because when you do that, you're designing your training to approximate. This is actually one of my favorite Bruce Lee sayings, but I have no idea where I got it from. Like, I can't find it in one of the books or whatever. So when I say, if anybody knows exactly where it is, please let me know. But you're designing your training to approximate the reality of the situations that you may encounter, right? Ron continues, then there are multi-man attack situations and FMA styles like Kun Tao and Silat or Kali, what Bob Landers would affectionately call third world tribal arts. Ron says that these are not only weapon oriented, but they're also multi-man attack oriented. And it's been that way for a long time because of certain, you know, like cultural aspects and what have you, right? So I think he's on the money, right, as he explains what the Bob Landers third world tribal arts have to offer. Now, since I brought up money, I must say this, right? I noticed that both camps are thought to have a money-making angle to what they do. And that was really interesting, right? There are people who think that in the Concepts camp, they try to make money off of Bruce Lee's name, but they teach stuff that he didn't teach. Whereas in the original camp, they too try to make money by saying that they have the real, the authentic Jeet Kune Do. So apparently, outside of the two camps, there's people who think that that people in both camps are in it just for the money. Well, what can you do? Perception is perception, right? I'll just say that if you make your living 100% in martial art, right, whether it's in JKD or any other martial art, you're sure to do things a little bit differently sometimes from someone who does not. It really is just that simple, right? Somebody who is a hobbyist as opposed to a professional does not have the identical approach as the other person, right? But as usual, as something I've said here before, there are people who they assign the worst possible motives and intentions to the things that people do. I guess if they just have an unfavorable opinion of the person or whatever, right? Something that was mentioned in the whole rigmarole was something about a sheep follows a sheep, right? And I thought, well, that's not always true, because when you apply critical thinking to that statement, you realize that in some circumstances, one sheep might be in front of another, but ultimately all the sheep are following the shepherd. And if there is no shepherd, sometimes the lead sheep happens to be the lead sheep because it's the most experienced sheep, and that's why the other ones follow him, her, or sheep. Sheep have genders? Anyhow, okay. So Richard also showed a photo sequence of Sifu Dan doing a savate sidekick, and then I think he followed up with a punch, and then he followed up with a trap, and then he finished with a jiu-jitsu technique, right? And the article was labeled as the Jeet Kune Do blend, and Richard and others gave the opinion that this is an example of Inasano teaching that savate, for example, is a part of Jeet Kune Do. Actually, it was he and we're not friends, but I think I have spoken to this guy, and just by virtue of being Richard's student, he's somebody that I hold it in high regard. Vincent Benitez said that what Sifu Torres is saying is that this concept, which Dan Inasano developed, is to fuse parts of martial arts together and calling it Jeet Kune Do, which it is not. Can anyone actually see a martial art technique or movement without naming it or identifying its nationality? Well, hang on a second here, Vincent, right? Of course you can. I can see a technique and I can call it a kick. I can further see a technique and call it a front kick or a side kick or a hook kick. But where would my ability to identify the kick as more than just a kick, where would that have come from? It would have to have come from some kind of art. And if it comes from some kind of art, then there's probably some kind of nationality associated with that art. Even if you somehow never trained in the art because you're just after the use of the science of the human body, you're still going to end up doing something that can be found in someone else's art. Does that make sense? Right? So you might not be interested in the identification, the nationalistic identification of an art. You're just interested, I don't mean you personally, Vincent, right? But someone's just interested in the science of the human body, right? How to throw a punch, how to throw a kick, how to do this, how to do whatever. Whatever it is that you do, it's going to be found in somebody's art somewhere in the world, right? Dan Inasano freely admits that Bruce Lee was able to ad-lib Filipino Kali without an in-depth study of the art. What did he ad-lib? What we call Largamano, right? Now, that's a story that's taken from, I don't have it here, right? From Sifu Dan's book, Jeet Kune Do, The Art and Philosophy of Bruce Lee, right? And this is where, as Richard points out, Dan Inasano wrote, I'll read the whole quote here. An individual cannot learn the principal roots of Jeet Kune Do through the accumulation of many different styles. For that would be like a singer trying to improve his voice by accumulating many songs. Rather, it is by understanding the roots of the problem. Some people believe that in the okay, no, this is not what Richard wrote. I think this is what I wrote, right? Or maybe not. Some people believe that in the 1980s, Inasano turned his back on this philosophy and began adding Filipino arts, Indonesian arts, the third world tribal arts, right? He renamed Bruce Lee's art as Junfan and used the Jeet Kune Do name, adding concepts to it, and taught his students to accumulate styles to learn Jeet Kune Do. And then this is definitely what Richard wrote. This is, no, he did not write this, but this is based on what he wrote, right? So some people accept that as historical fact and not opinion, which is very interesting to me. So let me make sure you're with me on this, right? Some people believe that in the 1980s, Inasano turned his back on the idea that you cannot learn the principal roots of Jeet Kune Do through the accumulation of many styles, and started to do that exact thing, accumulate many styles and call it Jeet Kune Do. That's interesting to me that Richard points it out as fact and not opinion, because unless you were there to hear Dan Inasano say exactly that, that he now believes that you can learn Jeet Kune Do or the principal roots of Jeet Kune Do by accumulating many styles, or you heard the recording of him saying just that, you cannot call it fact. It's still somebody's opinion. Now, it might be the opinion of somebody that you regard highly, somebody that you trust or whatever, but to my way of thinking, unless you were there to hear it yourself, it's not fact, it's opinion, right? Another side topic that came up, this was an interesting one, and again, because we're talking about unless you were there, you don't know for sure. This side topic was that Dan Inosanto did not spar. That apparently people like Bob Bremer and Dan Lee informed that Dan Inosanto never sparred. Well, it might be because he was teaching, but in any case, since I wasn't there, I can't refute that claim with authority. But I can tell you this, I've spoken myself with Jeet Kune Do old-timers of different generations, as a matter of fact, and they have said that people like Richard Bustillo hated to spar Inosanto because Inosanto was like a tank, right? And then there are others who have said, well, there are a couple of things to keep in mind. The whole introduction of the headgear and the track shoes and the body armor and the shin gear, all of these things came about, right? Because of sparring sessions between whom? Then the other thing, the other question that's raised is, would Bruce Lee have put Dan Inosanto in charge without Inosanto having been tested as to whether or not he could apply the training in a realistic manner, AKA sparring? Okay, all right. One last idea that came about was that we should call what we do by the different names that are out there for them. So original Jeet Kune Do, Jkd Concepts, and even Junfan Jeet Kune Do. I don't know about that, right? Because that's a solution only if you think that there should be separation in the JKD world and not unity. Additionally, that approach, again, to me, doesn't do much to dispel the idea that one approach to Jeet Kune Do is closer to the Bruce Lee ideal than is the other approach. The idea that what Bruce Lee taught was a thing that should be viewed in a vacuum, I have yet to find a Bruce Lee teaching, a Bruce Lee saying, whatever, that emphasizes that Jeet Kune Do is exactly this and exactly not that. So I think instead that we have to take the time, like I'm taking the time today talking for more than I do. You have to take the time to detail the history of Jeet Kune Do. Refer to it as both an art and a philosophy. And when you do that, you can then go on to explain to interested parties why and how there came to be different but complementary approaches to Jeet Kune Do. So as Chris Kent says, and Kevin Porter reminded me of this, Chris Kent says, well, Jkd Do Concepts, original Jeet Kune Do, are just two sides of the same coin, right? JKD is, again, personal opinion here, about transcendence. And to me, that is an example of transcendence. Man, the living creature, the creating individual, is always more important than any established style or system, right? Another aspect of that transcendence is this. As far as other styles or schools are concerned, take no thought of who is right or wrong or who is better than. Be not for or against. For in the landscape of spring, there is neither better nor worse. The flowering branches grow naturally, some long, some short. I think that we should apply this to this whole thought on Jeet Kune Do itself. When this came about, it might have been a comparison or a contrast between Jeet Kune Do and other things. Now, I think it's a comparison or a contrast between different modes of thought about Jeet Kune Do. All right. Okay, so that's it. Feel free, share. You know what? Let me take a look and see. if there's anything I should respond to, he would probably change the word concept to principles. Carlos Gonzalez says, perhaps, Carlos, he might change concept to principles, but then would that have made any difference if he was still showing third world tribal arts, right? He'd probably still get himself in trouble. So there maybe there should be something else that was done. Hey, Sifu Randy. Hey, Terry Valor got me in Richard Torres. Terry Valor got me in trouble. Richard Torres says original Jeet Kune Do here, right? Hey, Kenny Murphy, Charles Loudermilk. Richard, you're too kind, right? Stuart finally got his phone fixed. JKD Legends in the house. Yes, Bob Landers, you're here, right? Yeah, Bob, I saw you did say something about this. Jkd Concepts is now defunct, right? I don't know what you're referring to unless it's something to do with the certificates that now no longer say in search of the Jeet Kune Do concept or whatever, or there was whatever. All right, my friend told me this was going to be an Inasano apologetic podcast. Oh God, right? Craig Stanton, Jeet Kune Do is a concept. Craig, I don't know if you saw this, but probably a long time ago, I actually did a podcast where I showed how many times Bruce Lee used the word concept or principle in describing what it is that he did. Bob Lander says everything with Dan and Asano is a riddle. No, not really, Bob. Depends on where you're at, right? Everything. Remember that more people have laid their eyes on Dan and Asano than laid their eyes on Ted Wong. So if you think that everything with Dan and Asano is a riddle, that's probably because you're getting it second hand, third hand, fourth hand. You're getting it from somebody who's not an Inasano insider, an Inasano intimate, and they're giving you their opinion or their thoughts on something, and they're thinking that it's a riddle. So then you end up thinking that it's a riddle too. Mark Stewart, research does not mean continuous multi-classical cross-training. Right, true. And research is not the same thing as loving to learn different things and going on and on and on, learning all these different things. Research is when you sit down with the person who is on the receiving end of all this cross-training, and he details for you and with you why he does what he does, and then says, so you see how this is just like this, but what they do, they have this little twist in it. And then he tells you, that's something I learned from Bruce Lee, because we would watch stuff and Bruce Lee would, and I would go, yeah, I don't really know about this. And Bruce Lee would say, yeah, but did you see that one little thing, right? So Bob Landers, what do you say? Most JKD can't do a proper front hand lead, which Bruce Lee said was the backbone of JKD hidden. All right, well, I guess, Bob, you have seen most of the Jeet Kune Do Concepts people, right? So yeah, he had Dan close the school. Yeah, everybody knows that. That's nothing new, right? Kenny Murphy, it wasn't relevant at my school. No bladed impact weapons needed, just get a gun. Right, yeah, because everybody can put their hands on a gun easily, Bob, all right? Craig Stanton, oh God, this is gonna be good. Pre-1973, wait, I can't read this one. Why do pre-73 practitioners evolve every aspect of their lives yet remain decades in the past with their martial arts training? Did Sijo not evolve his curriculum from arriving in Seattle to his untimely demise? Craig, I think it's because people, there are people who think that they have a broad-minded or an open-minded or an expanded approach to things, but they don't realize that they have that expanded approach only, let's say there's 4 things, right? They have that expanded approach to 1, 2, and 3, but number 4, for whatever reason, this becomes their approach, right? That's funny. The Commodore 64. The reason I fell in love with Filipino martial arts was because of all their basic fundamentals, pure. See, Tanya Subing Monroe understands, and she understands it at a level, a much deeper level than somebody like me could ever understand it. Right, Bob Landers, this thing about modern world has guns, third world. Yeah, so the modern world right now, Bob Landers, would include the mostly peaceful protests that are going on in Portland, that went on in Seattle, that go on in Chicago, in New York, and what have you, where a lot of people are not using guns, but they're using a lot of other weapons, right? So modern world has guns, third world has sticks and knives. I could see why somebody would accuse you, Bob, of being a little bit biased, right? Ted Wong said the concept guys were parasites. Well, Bob, you had to go there, right? If Ted Wong said that people like me were parasites, then to heck with Ted Wong, a man that I admired greatly, that I thought moved like a god. But if he said that I was a parasite, to heck with him. All right. Combination of the two is even more deadly since you don't have infinite bullets. Nice one, Ty. Right? Sheep will stray. Exactly, Ms. Tanya. Right? If you have a gun, martial arts is not necessary. And anybody, people, that's not true at all. Right? Bob, can someone post a clip of Dan and Asano doing the front hand lead? I don't know, right? So can somebody post a clip of me cooking eggs in my kitchen? No, because such a clip doesn't exist. Doesn't mean I don't know how to whip up a good egg in my kitchen. God. Other people have had fighting sticks other than just the Philippines. Jesus. Okay, Bob, I think I'll ignore what you're saying right now. You're not contributing. You can want to see whatever the hell it is you want to see, right? Okay, Carlos Gonzalez, a more intelligent approach to this discussion. A football coach doesn't get on the field and play with the players. He has to watch and observe to see where they need improvement. Yeah, but see, Carlos, apparently, right, for Bob Landers, it's tough to understand that concept. You see, he doesn't have the ability to extract a training methodology, an approach to training, right? And is it not surprising that Dan Asano, a football player and a PE coach, right, would have somewhat of a similar approach, right? Bob, sometimes you just don't get it. Right. But you know what, I mean, I don't know how much actual teaching Bob has done. And if he has, it might not be as much as Dan Asano has done. I don't think so. So I don't think that Bob really gets to comment. Why am I even talking about him? He's being stupid this time around, right? The videos that Dan Asano states that you can go from Thai for Jiu-Jitsu was to demonstrate how to flow between ranges and use name arts to give people who only knew the arts to understand the process. Yeah, Terry, that's exactly it. You can explain concepts or what have you, but when people give something a name, it's easier for people to understand. It's easier for people to relate to it. It's easier for people even to remember it. So there are certain things like we get into these discussions all the time. It's tough for new students to understand the deeper concepts of Jeet Kune Do. So I have a certain amount of sayings that I have said over and over, that I have repeated and it's actually something that I got from Dan Inosanto. And what happens is that I've noticed that by saying those things to the students, it helps them to understand. So you can take somebody who is brand new, somebody who has been with us for 2 days, and you can explain something to them using one of our proprietary language statements, and they go, oh, why can we do that? Because this is something that we have tested over time, saying it to different people, right? So Terry, you're on the mark in terms of just identifying, yeah, here's a Thai boxing here's a Thai boxing kick that we're using. It doesn't mean that it's not a kick, and that the only time that you use kicking, you have to use Muay Thai. That's a ridiculous thing, right? Okay, so Ms. Tanya says, like all good instructors during class, you're watching students to help them improve. It happens after classes with a select few. Thank you, right? Thank you. I should have just reached out to you, Ms. Tanya, for insight on that whole sparring thing. I thought it ridiculous, right? And one of these days we'll talk about people who go out there and say, oh, Inosanto didn't do this, Inosanto didn't do that. It's quite possible that they never saw him do it because they were only there for a few months, right? Dan has honored his promise to Bruce. He's again an example of what we should all strive for to become. We were not there. He has made it clear. People just want to throw it. Well, yeah, I mean, look, people have their, one thing, Carlos, about Dan Inosanto, and I'm sure you have experienced this, Ms. Tanya has experienced it as well. I have never heard Dan Inosanto put down an instructor in public or in private. When I told him Ted Wong was coming to town, he was like, you're going, right? I was like, yeah. He goes, good, you gotta go. It wasn't, oh no, Ted doesn't have it, this and that. Ridiculous. That is not Dan Inosanto. So even if you were not a martial arts student of Dan Inosanto's, but you came across his approach to life, his philosophy to life, right? You could be a student of that. You don't even have to do the martial art thing. You could just study with him to learn how to be a better human being, to learn how to be a more open-minded human being, rather than this damn nonsense that some people are, whatever. Anyhow. Bob, even I can understand that she's saying that she has been in front of his right lead many times. I'm probably a few minutes behind you guys on the comments here, right? You know how it is. She's probably on her phone, and you know how it is typing on a phone. So don't be an idiot, Bob. Bill Matucci, what's up? Right? Okay. Bob, don't be such an, you know, I said I wasn't going to comment on your stuff anymore. Course, it's, though, it's me. I can't read. The comments are much faster than I am. That's all it is. Bill, I don't know what you're referring to. Okay. All right. Well, Richard, that sounds more like it, right? Okay, I think I will deal with this one. He meant they lived off financially Bruce's reputation while not teaching his art. It was a general, see, yeah. So I'm going to tell you of another statement, right? Here's something you might not be aware of, Bob. There are people who came to Dan Inosanto for Dan Inosanto. It had nothing to do with Bruce Lee, okay? Now, I came to Dan Inosanto because of Bruce Lee, but it didn't affect me in any way that he was teaching Filipino martial arts when I first met him. Everything that I had seen was, you know, pointed to the fact that Dan Inosanto was the man. So I and other people chose to stay with Dan Inosanto, regardless, we stayed with him because of who he is. We didn't stay with him because it was like, oh, he was with Bruce Lee, so if I stay with him, I'll get the pure Bruce Lee or whatever. It's like, came for Bruce Lee, stayed for Inosanto, right? Now, I would ask you guys to keep your back and forth out of my podcasts, but that's okay, right? Exactly, Mark. Yeah, right. That's the thing that they should do on their own, not on here. All right, okay, so that's that, right? So I forget who it was that said, I think it was Coase that said that this would be a controversial topic. And obviously, there are some people who cannot help themselves, but always have to take some kind of personal dig at other people, when all of us, see, all of us, today's a blue day. See that? That right there is what brings all of us together in some form or fashion. But there are people who insist, who absolutely insist on being idiots when it comes to this, and trying to take digs at other people, when all of us have the same root, right? So instead of trying to get to a deep understanding of the roots, no, they have to keep everything at a surface level and be stupid about it, right? That's their way, is not my way, right? Okay, so that's it. Sign up for notifications so when we go live here on Facebook. Subscribe over on the YouTube for the I Love Jeet Kune Do broadcast and the Jeet Kune Do dialogues. And be sure to hit the notification bell while you're over there subscribing. Follow me on Twitter at Dwight Woods and on Instagram at Dwight D. Woods. Coming up on Sunday. So we had a special Friday broadcast. We'll have a special Sunday Jeet Kune Do dialogues with a number. The exact number is still to be confirmed, but it will be with a number of the North Carolina Jkd notables, as I call them, right? So that should be on Sunday at 6 p.m. So hopefully I'll see some of you here on better behavior, right? The rest of you, maybe I'll see you next week, regular Wednesday, for another issue of the I Love Jeet Kune Do broadcast. This is Dwight Woods, the Jeet Kune Do Rebel, signing off. Enjoy your weekend. Take care. Talk soon. Peace.